Okay, Ben, the meeting is recording and you can start.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Ben Seebeck. I'm a Community Policy Program Manager with HM's Planning Development. We're here to provide a presentation concerning the public information meeting for case 23820 concerning the Southdale Future Growth Node neighborhood planning process. The public information meeting was originally held on Monday, February 7th, 2022. Due to technical reasons, the recording is not available, so we're re-recording the presentation so we can post it on the municipal website. We apologize for the error, but want to assure those watching this presentation that it contains the same information as presented at the original public information meeting. The only difference is that I will not go over the detailed instructions about how to participate in the online format. We will ensure that the future meetings will be recorded, and I also note that the minutes from the Monday, the February 7th, February 7th meeting will be posted along with this recording. So we're making the best of the information we have to make sure those who weren't able to sit to the meeting will have the same information and be able to gather the hear responses that were provided at that meeting. Before we begin the meeting, we'd like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq First Nations people. HM acknowledges the Peace and Friendships Treaties and signed in this territory and recognize that we are all treaty people. We'd also like to affirm that we are in a decade of people of African descent. African Nova Scotians are distinct founding people in our community and have been a key part in Nova Scotian culture and history. The agenda for today is, following this introduction, is a HRM planning staff presentation to go over the process and the key policy considerations that will be considered by staff and HRM Council, followed by a presentation by ZAC Consultants and Clayton Developments, who are representing landowners to outline their vision for the site. During the public meeting, we also had a third component of the agenda, which was an opportunity for those to ask questions or comments. And as I mentioned earlier, the minutes from that meeting are available on the website. As way of introduction, I have introduced myself. My name is Ben Seebeck. Now I'm the Manager of Community Policy Program for HM. I'm acting as role of facilitator for this meeting. Ross Grant is the planner, lead planner on the file, and he'll be providing the staff overview. We also have Connor Wallace from ZAC Architecture and Planning, who will be presenting on behalf of the landowners, as well as Stephanie Moff from Clayton Developments, who will also be presenting on behalf of landowners. And at this point, I'll pass it over for Ross to provide the staff presentation.
Thanks, Ben. So just to go over the purpose of this meeting quickly, it's to introduce the planning process and share information with the public. And on the original meeting was to listen and collect your questions and comments, but of course we're still doing that through other methods, and to hear opportunities to provide feedback at the end of the presentation. The role of HRM staff through this planning process is to manage the process of the planning application, be the main point of contact for the applicant and the general public regarding questions, comments, or concerns, and to draft reports and make recommendations to Regional Council and Community Council. So this project was initiated by Halifax Regional Council in January of this year. The landowners are AJ LeGros Holdings Limited, represented by Clayton Developments and ZAP. And 101 Research Drive is owned by Portacana Holdings. The location is the Southdale Future Growth Node, which is the lands located north of Mount Hope Avenue, northwest of Highway 111 Exit 8, and just off of 101 Research Drive lands. The proposal is to initiate master neighborhood planning through a municipal plan amendment and development agreement process. So I'd like to give a brief overview of regional plan policies. The area that the Southdale Future Growth Node is located in was first identified in the 2006 regional plan and subsequently in the 2014 regional plan update as urban settlement. This designation provides policy support for serviced development. It's also located adjacent to the Woodside Regional Local Growth Center, which supports medium to high density residential uses and encourages access to transit and a provision of mixed uses. Regional plan policy also requires that the municipality consider the Woodside Community Vision Statement prepared in 2011 when preparing secondary municipal planning strategies or amending them. There's also policy in the regional plan which requires council to consider ways to encourage housing affordability. This may include things such as housing mix, reduced lot dimensions, or housing for specific populations. That Woodside Vision and Action Plan that I spoke to, I just wanted to quickly read the vision. Our community shines as a destination with a rich history tied to the diverse people who live, work, and care about Woodside. This study identified some key assets, and just a few of them that I'd like to point out are the ferry terminal and the local transit service, local schools, the community college, the hospital, and the industrial park nearby. And this future growth node planning process is an opportunity to implement actions from that vision and leverage assets through comprehensive planning processes. Under the regional center plan, the area is designated as future growth node, and the zone is Comprehensive Development District 1. The existing uses on the site are woodland, wetland, and office building, and I'll speak to these in detail in a moment. Future growth nodes under the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy are large sites which can accommodate additional growth, but which require master planning to create policy for parks, trails, public streets, infrastructure, land uses, bonus zoning provisions, and more before development can take place. Development will then proceed under development agreements, which gives specific location of parks, roads, trails, buildings, etc., and can allow development under specific zones and land use bylaw provisions. Currently, the planning process is in stage 1 or part 1. This is the master planning process that I mentioned on the last slide. The purpose of this process is to take public feedback, which is what we're doing right now. During this process, we also do a detailed review of environmental features, site context. We'll have a traffic statement, infrastructure review, and culture and heritage assessments. And the outcome of a master planning process would be policies contained within the regional center secondary planning strategy and a concept plan, which would show things such as an overall site plan, location of important connections such as public roads and trails, the location and general scale of development, for example, low rise or mid rise, and general land uses such as commercial or residential, and can also include policies on things like buffering, landscaping, stormwater, and the environment. This master planning process and the policies that come from it will be considered by a regional council. Should regional council approve policies for the site, the planning process would advance to part 2. This is the development agreement process. A development agreement enables construction of a project under a local planning policy. It is a binding legal contract between HRM and the landowner. This stage would also include additional opportunities for public feedback. And the development agreement would include specific details on things like parks, building design, land uses, the number of units permitted in the development, lighting, materials, bonus zoning, phasing, roads, and more. A development agreement would be considered by the Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council. And the final stage of the planning process would be the permitting and subdivision process. If planning policy is approved by regional council and a development agreement is approved by the community council, the project can proceed to subdivision for streets and lots. And just a couple notes on that. The wetland cannot be altered unless provincial approval is granted, and street and infrastructure design must comply with municipal standards. Subdivision would involve HRM internal review and would also involve the province and other external agencies. Each building is, of course, also required to get a building permit, and this would check for compliance with the land use bylaw, any potential development agreements, building codes, and more. A few specific details we wanted to cover on wetland and environment. So wetland alteration, as I previously mentioned, is jurisdiction of the province of Nova Scotia. Any proposed alteration would require provincial review and approval before it could proceed. On the municipality side, HRM requires a minimum 20-meter buffer from wetlands and watercourses that must remain undisturbed. Paths, driveways, roads, and infrastructure are permitted, however, within this buffer. Stormwater management practices may include innovative ways of capturing runoff, and those can be discussed through this process. And the wetland may be transferred to the municipality as part of the outcome of the development process. HRM has several policies that speak to the environment, just a few that I wanted to highlight here. So from the Future Growth Node policies, that requires a land suitability assessment, as I previously mentioned. The Halifax 2050 plan discusses protecting sensitive green spaces, creating climate-informed stormwater management plans for development, and reducing urban sprawl. The Green Network Plan recognizes the importance of wetlands and their associated buffers. And the Urban Forest Master Plan discusses municipal street trees on public streets, retaining existing tree cover through screening and buffering provisions, and allowing for new trees to be planted for new development. And the subdivision bylaw also requires a parkland dedication, which would set aside a certain amount of parkland on the site. In terms of the planning process, as I mentioned, it's already been initiated by Regional Council. HRM internal review of the project is currently ongoing, and we're currently at the public meeting phase of the policy part of the project. In the future, the project will advance to the draft policy and development agreement stage, and there will be more public input welcomed at that time. Any policy recommendations would go to Regional Council and include a public hearing where the public is welcome to address Council directly. And if Regional Council should approve the policy and the plan amendment, it would be able to proceed to a development agreement, which would be considered by the Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council. If Harbour East Marine Drive Community Council chooses to approve a development agreement, there's a 14-day appeal period where any aggrieved person can appeal the development agreement. So far, 2 proposals have been submitted on the Southdale lands. Specific development proposals can't be considered on the site until policies are approved by Regional Council, as previously mentioned. The landowners submit studies for review and are engaged during the policy phase, and proposals are shared with the public for feedback. More engagement will take place on the proposed policies at a later date. So we just quickly wanted to provide a brief overview of one of the 2 proposals that have been submitted. This first proposal is on the lands located at the end of Fenwick Street, and it generally consists of 3 4-story multi-unit buildings and underground and surface parking. And I'll just note that the 20-meter wetland buffer is shown on the plan.
Thanks, Ross, for a great overview of the planning process and the key policy considerations. Now I'll like to invite Connor Wallace and Stephanie Ma to present on behalf of the landowner. I think it's over to you, Connor, first.
Perfect. I'm going to actually hand it over to Stephanie to get started, and we're going to tag team this. So,
Okay,
Stephanie, go ahead.
Thanks. Next slide. So I'm Stephanie Ma, Senior Planner with Clayton Developments, and I'll take us through a few slides just to provide some detail on the plan being proposed. This slide shows the 2 PIDs that make up the LeGros Clayton Partnership property. Next slide. Zooming out to look at the broader context, we can see that the subject site is very conveniently situated amongst services that will meet everyday needs of the residents living here. The site abuts an existing transit route, which is shown in the aqua blue color. The Woodside Ferry Terminal is easily accessible to travel to and from downtown Halifax and beyond. The site is within walking distance of a commercial node that includes a grocery store just 600 meters away. There's close proximity to employment nodes, including Dartmouth General Hospital and the Woodside Industrial Park. And there are 2 schools nearby, Dartmouth South Academy being only 500 meters away and South Woodside School being 1.5 kilometers away. As well, there's also the NSCC Ivany campus about 1.2 kilometers away. Next slide, please. This is a detailed view of our site plan. It contains a variety of home styles designed for different lifestyles and budgets, laid out with an interconnected street network. You can see the breakdown of the unit styles on the right-hand side of the screen. The plan includes multiple residential units, townhouses, and a smaller number of fourplexes and single-family homes. I'll go over the choice of unit styles a bit later in the presentation. There is a approximately 2-acre park located as a focal point in the center of the community and includes a buffer of existing trees against the neighboring properties. We have left the wetland largely undisturbed. The site is accessed with one single road crossing the wetland. The interconnected street network provides access to the surrounding community via Lynn Drive, and a series of trails shown in bright red on the plan provide opportunities for active transportation and leisure throughout the area. I'll pass it over to Connor to go over the next slide.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. As mentioned prior, my name is Connor Wallace. I am a planning consultant with ZAP Consulting, working with Clayton Developments and the landowner on this particular project. I'd like to briefly speak to the proposed development concept for the lands as it relates to the applicable planning policies contained within the regional center secondary municipal planning strategy. The planning strategy includes various objectives for the development of future growth nodes, which includes the Southdale Growth Node and the subject site we're speaking about this evening. One objective is to have a mix of land uses, including a range of housing types. The proposed development concept that's on the screen in front of you now includes a variety of housing types ranging from single unit dwellings to townhouses to 4-unit ground-based multi-unit dwellings to multi-unit apartment dwellings. So there's a wide variety of housing types and choices within the development. There's also consideration to include ground level commercial and or institutional uses within the multi-unit buildings as an optional land use option. The second objective of the plan is to protect and preserve environmentally sensitive land. The proposed development preserves the majority of an existing wetland on the property to remain as natural open space to be used for passive recreation purposes, as Stephanie was alluding to earlier. Another planning objective is to provide a transportation network that prioritizes transit, pedestrians, and active transportation while connecting to surrounding communities. The proposed concept plan includes a network of streets and trails that support pedestrian connectivity and active transportation throughout the site and to surrounding communities and transit services. The plan also includes low-rise building forms on the outer edges adjacent to existing established low-rise residential communities. An additional objective of the plan is to provide public parks and open spaces to meet recreational needs of residents. As mentioned prior, the development concept proposes to preserve the majority of an existing wetland on the property to be used for passive recreation. In addition, the plan includes approximately a 2.2-acre park land piece that Stephanie was mentioning earlier, located centrally within the development, providing ease of access for the residents within the development and the surrounding community. Lastly, the plan is cognizant of the property abutting a 100 series highway and has set buildings back from the highway in accordance with provincial standards. I'll hand it back over to you, Stephanie.
You can go to the next slide. I think that's the next slide after that. So Clayton Developments has a history of developing in environmentally sensitive ways. This slide shows the different stormwater management best practices that we've used in the past and had great success with. Rain gardens, bioretention areas, permeable pavers, all of these features work to absorb, direct, and or treat stormwater to work to meet HRM standards and requirements to make sure that the quantity as well as the quantity is balanced to pre-development conditions and the quality of the stormwater runoff is maintained and does not negatively impact the surrounding natural environment. I'll hand it back over to Connor for the next slide.
Perfect. Yeah, next slide, please. So as alluded to earlier, there were several technical studies and analysis that were completed in conjunction with the development concept and to help inform the development concept that's being presented this evening. The first was a land suitability analysis. This was a desktop evaluation to assess for potential environmental constraints with field verification for the wetlands, watercourses, and species at risk. The analysis identified limited environmental constraints were identified within the site, including no specific species at risk. The large wetland on the site was not identified as a wetland of special significance by Nova Scotia Environment. Another technical study that was completed was an archaeological analysis, which was an assessment including a historical background study and reconnaissance for archaeological resources within the site. South of the wetland, the presence of a probable house foundation and outbuilding was discovered through this process. Further shovel testing determined that these findings are not cultural and in nature. As such, no further archaeological mitigation was recommended within the report. An additional study completed was a traffic analysis where a traffic engineer looked at intersection site distance analysis for safety of turn movements. It looked at trip generation analysis of the development, which during peak hours in the morning and evening, which range from 200 to 250 vehicle trips during those peak hours. The study recommended a crosswalk at Mount Hope Avenue connecting to the existing multi-use path on the western side of Mount Hope Avenue. And lastly, it identified that the site-generated trips are not expected to have any significant impact on the levels of performance on adjacent streets and intersections or the regional street system. Lastly, a servicing analysis was completed to understand how the development could be serviced with municipal service infrastructure. The development is intended to be serviced by municipal water and sanitary. The proposed water connections at Mount Hope Avenue, Baker Drive, and Lynn Drive. This creates a connection of two separate water systems within Halifax Water's overall regional network, creating a looping of those water systems, improving efficiency of the system. Sanitary connections are proposed at Mount Hope Avenue and Highway 111, and overall the study confirmed that there is adequate service capacity within the regional system to support a development of this nature with the amount of units being contemplated. Pass it back over to you, Stephanie.
Thanks. Next slide. So a major priority for this project is to provide housing that is attainable, and what we mean by that is affordable for the average household. Some practical ways that we're working towards reducing the cost of housing are by creating narrower frontages and smaller lot sizes. Building less road infrastructure per residence allows the cost of the units to come down. Building homes with a smaller footprint also lowers the construction cost of the home itself. The multiple residential buildings are all kept to a mid-rise height rather than taller forms, which allows us to reduce construction costs. These savings can all be passed along to the renters and buyers, resulting in more attainable rents and home prices. Next slide. Oh, that's it. So thank you for allowing me and Connor to have our say in the presentation. And if you want to ask any questions, you can reach out to me directly at smah@claytondev.com. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie and Connor, for presenting at the original public meeting and also for participating in this re-recording. I appreciate you making the time. At this point, I'll pass it back to Ross to outline the type of feedback that we're looking for at this point in the process, and also to outline other ways of providing feedback going forward. Ross?
Okay, thanks. Just a couple points on the feedback that's being sought at this point. Of course, we welcome any comments, but these are some suggested points of feedback. The overall vision for the lands, important connections such as roads and trails, the relationship of development to the wetlands, location and general scale of development, land uses, parkland and amenities that may be on the site, and environmental protection. And as Ben mentioned, just some ways to participate in the process. There will be future public meetings on this project. Feel free to provide written comments by email to my email shown on the slide here, or to call me. You can also sign up for email updates by sending me an email and asking to be added to the list. You can follow us on social media at Halifax Planning and attend the public hearing when the project goes to Regional Council.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you, Stephanie and Connor, for taking the time and providing your presentation. And thank you for all those who are watching this recording.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much.